I'm Beth Green, and I am here to talk to you about enrichment at Mount Daniel. And I'm going to go, it's really just a general overview. I'll talk a little bit about identification, and then I'm linking at the end the principal's coffee presentation that they did at Oak Street. So that covers how services work there and that kind of stuff. I'm going to introduce myself. We've met before, but this is my second career here. So I grew up in Southern California. I went to the University of California at San Diego. I went to law school straight from college. I practiced law for 4 years, which was about 3 years too many. And then I left and went back to get my master's in education at Marymount, and I've been teaching ever since. I taught in Fairfax County with self-contained, gifted for 3 years. Then I taught preschool for 6 years, and then I've been here for 15 years. So the crux of enrichment happens in the classroom at Mount Daniel, really everywhere, at any school. And differentiation, I think, is something parents are super familiar with now. It's a key part of enrichment. Our classroom teachers are great at it. They differentiate the content, the process, the product. One of the things I want to make sure that I say is differentiation happens a lot in conversations in the classroom. So if you have a student who has super advanced math skills, is a super advanced reader, the kind of things they're bringing home are likely to look very easy and like things that they've done years before. I encourage you to talk to your student about the kind of conversations that go on in classrooms, because, good morning, a lot of that differentiation happens in a smaller group where everyone's doing the same base level work, but the higher level students are taking it further. They're working with not just nickels and dimes, but also quarters, or they're doing word problems that are on the same topic. So differentiation, even when it's not happening on a physical product that you see, is still happening in the classroom. The other part, or one of the other parts of enrichment here at Mount Daniel, happens during Encore. So all kindergarten, first and second grade students come to Enrichment Encore. I alternate with technology. So 1 week they see me, 1 week they see Mr. D. They're usually happier during that week. They do fun stuff with iPads. We do thinking skills and problem solving in Enrichment Encore. And any work that your student does during that time has my name on it, just so you'll know that's what it came from. All of the Encore lessons are grouped by strand, and so each grade level gets a series of lessons that goes with each strand. So there's a divergent creative thinking strand, there's visual thinking and spatial reasoning, convergent, like linear, traditional, one right answer thinking, and evaluative thinking, judgment thinking, choosing the right answer. One of the goals, actually my specific goal as a teacher this year, is identifying an area of strength for every student at Mount Daniel. And this is, I keep notes about what we do, and every child has a relative strength, and some of them are pretty equal across the board. They're strong in lots of areas, and some of them are much, like I have a lot of visual, spatial kids, and that kind of thinking doesn't always show itself in traditional school thinking. So being able to kind of bring that out in Enrichment Encore is one of the great things about it for me. There's a name for the kind of tasks like this, the thinking skills, and Peter Lillendahl, who wrote this great book, Building Thinking Classrooms, that we did, Jen Fessenden, who runs the math for FCCPS, did a book club about this book last year that just kind of broke people's minds in classrooms wide open about how to teach math. And he coined this term non-curricular tasks, which is a good way to look at what I do in enrichment. And this quote is from his book, that those kinds of tasks, non-curricular tasks, focus heavily around engaging students in the activity of thinking. They're not linked to a curricular outcome. They're not about the Revolutionary War or specifically about addition or subtraction, but they prime kids to do the kind of thinking that they need to approach higher level tasks in the classroom. This is just another quote from Peter Liljedahl about how, in order to do higher level thinking, starting with non-curricular tasks. And for me, even once the kids get to be second grade and older, starting with tasks that aren't tied to grades is the way to let the kids feel free to explore, make mistakes, do higher level thinking, where they are gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna indulge myself and show this video of Dr. Becky, who you might be familiar with, who's amazing, because she explains better than I ever could what my philosophy of what enrichment, advanced academics, differentiation should be covering. It's like a minute and a half.
Actually, that's a good question. What does resilience feel like?
I think the word resilience has a positive connotation, but when you're being resilient, it definitely does not feel positive.
I think that's so beautiful. Being resilient doesn't feel resilient at all. It feels so messy. Another way of thinking about it is we also have not knowing and knowing. The space between not knowing something and knowing something is really painful, especially if you've fashioned yourself to be someone who's academically talented, because then it almost feels like your academic success or your identity as a smart person is tied to knowing. When you're in the space of that, it's really easy to want to exit something. So this has a name in my mind, right? It's called the learning space. This is actually what learning, no matter what you're learning, something on the job, something from puzzles, learning to read, you don't know how to do it, you want to know how to do it. And what I think is really empowering to know is the learning space has one feeling associated with it: frustration. That's literally how learning feels. And if you think about that, then frustration becomes this actually like almost amazing thing you can learn to love, even though it's painful, because you're like, this is actually a sign that I'm learning. Whenever you're frustrated, it literally means you're somewhere in the learning space. And why frustration tolerance is so important is because people think that resilience and success comes from getting to knowing as soon as possible. They're wrong. Resilience and success comes from the length of time you can just tolerate being in this space. The longer you can tolerate being here, the more you will ride this, and the more you'll eventually come here.
If your students take away nothing from working with me, other than that making mistakes is a positive sign that they are doing work that is hard enough for them, then I feel I have done my job. This clip of Dr. Becky is actually in a college class where she's speaking to Duke students. My son actually is a college student now. He took a class called Resilient Student as a first year. And it was a lot of this kind of, as a parent, I'll say I wasn't the best at building frustration tolerance in my own children, and I really see that affecting them now that they are college students. And if kids can learn when they are kindergartners, first graders, second graders, that making a mistake is a positive thing, then that will pay off for them throughout their academic career, their personal life. Just, it makes a huge difference. I'll give you a couple examples of how this works in the classroom and how it integrates vertically throughout the grades. So this is an example of a non-curricular task with visual spatial thinking. When I'm teaching one of the visual spatial thinking lessons to the kindergartners, we read this book, I'm the Biggest Thing in the Ocean. It's about a giant squid who's very proud of his size and compares himself to other beings in the ocean and is always larger until he gets eaten by a whale. And then once he's inside the whale, looks around and realizes, I'm the biggest thing in the whale. So it's the viewer stays constant, but what he's comparing himself to changes. In first grade, we read They All Saw a Cat by Brendan Wenzel, which is a book where what is being viewed, the cat, stays the same, but the way that it is perceived changes because the viewer changes. So when the child is looking at the cat, the tail hugs the child's leg and the cat's eyes are big and it's smiling. And when the mouse looks at the cat, you can all of a sudden see for the first time in the book the claws, the teeth, everything's red and triangular. And so the kids really talk about how those things change and grasping that the cat itself, the way that it looks, doesn't actually change. It always looks like this objectively, even though it's viewed differently by the different characters. And then in second grade, we read this book, which is round, which is bigger. And this is visual comparisons where the viewer stays constant, the objects stay constant, but something happens to change the object. So which one is round? We've got the apple and the armadillo. The kids are super proud, of course, it's the apple. It's really easy for a second grader. And then I asked them, well, what's gonna happen to change the answer? You still have the same two choices, apple, armadillo, but now the answer is gonna be armadillo. And second graders can articulate the armadillo is gonna roll into a ball, somebody's gonna eat the apple, so now the opposite one is round. And then they do it themselves. So I am almost always using a book that if you look at it as a parent, it appears like it's too young for the kids that I'm doing it with. I use a lot of board books, and those, they have a simple structure where the kids can easily understand the structure and then themselves add to it. So that's almost always what we're doing in terms of the product for them. So this student, their question is, which is more magicaler? And your choices are the cat and the magician pulling the bunny out of the hat. And then it turns out that it's a fairy cat who makes the magician disappear. So the things that they come up with and the simplicity, but also just the beauty of a lot of these things, I sometimes think they can't do them. Like, well, this would be a good idea to do, but I have to kind of test it out to see what will happen. And they never cease to amaze with what they come up with. So which is thicker, the tree or the twig, and then now the tree's a piece of paper and the twig made of fire. This is divergent thinking in first grade. I love this book, 1 + 1 = 5 by David La Rochelle. The cover alone, then they just can't control themselves with. It's, no, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 5. So the way the book works is 1 + 1 = 4. You have to look at the picture, figure out how to add the words to the equation to make it true. So this one is pretty straightforward. We start with this one. So 1 bird + 1 airplane = 4 wings. And they get more complicated as the book goes on, and then the kids do their own. So 1 + 1 = 1. Because 1, and this is the child's name, 1 so-and-so + 1 project = 1 mess. Or 1 + 1 = 10,253. 1 so-and-so + 1 pancake = 10,253 crumbs. So the creativity, and they're really self-leveling activities, so they can make them as hard as they want to. Everybody in enrichment can achieve some level of success. I do a little more scaffolding for some of the students, other ones don't need it. It's really kind of a beautiful thing to watch. In kindergarten, we start with 10 black dots. We read that book, they do pictures with dot stickers. And then we read this one, the Turnaround Upside Down Alphabet book, which is a super basic book that just shows you the letter, and then you turn the book, it looks like a bird's beak on the side. And then we put them together. So we do a lesson on 10 black dots, the next time a lesson on the Turnaround Upside Down Alphabet book, and then they use dots and letters together. So this student has just used 1 dot and 1 letter, which is fine, to make a bird on a nest. And so this is the egg and the nest, this is the body of the bird. I don't give them the letters and the dots until they can tell me how many letters, how many dots, what they're gonna make, because I want them to have a plan in advance. This student, when I came up to her to ask her about her letters, told me she needed 2 P's, 2 A's, 6 dots, and she was gonna make birds in a nest. I had no vision of how that was gonna come out, but she knew before she even started that this is what it was gonna look like. So the sort of self-leveling of they both made a bird and a nest, but the shapes and the visual thinking that goes on there is like, it's very easy to see when you're looking at those products. Another part of enrichment here at Mount Daniel is small group. We have a little pull-out enrichment think lab in 1st and 2nd grade, which is for students who demonstrate the need for more academic challenge based on assessments, on teacher recommendation, on the testing that they do for, they take the Naglieri in 1st grade and the COGAT in 2nd grade. It's a very brief 6-class session where we explore some deeper topics. It's some math, some language arts. We do a little like social studies kind of, and so I only see them 6 times, but I get them started on work that then they can do throughout the year for me. And there's little clubs they can join if they're doing the packets. It's fluid by design. It is not the same as advanced academic identification. So you can have a student who never comes to Think Lab, who is identified as level 2 or level 3 or level 4 advanced academics at Oak Street and beyond. And you can have a student who came for Think Lab and doesn't wind up with an identification. The two don't dovetail completely. When it comes to identification, all FCCPS 2nd graders are screened by the Student Identification and Placement Committee. This part here is one of the things that is such a beautiful, unique part of FCCPS. You know, coming from, I used to teach in Fairfax County, where there's an amorphous committee that sort of makes this decision. Here, we meet and sit and talk about every single 2nd grader. One by one, the classroom teacher comes when we talk about the kids in their classroom. They bring the portfolios. We literally talk about every student. And the ability to do that, to have the time to discuss everybody, is one of the great things about having such a tiny class here. That committee, the Student Identification and Placement Committee, meets at the end of May, and then there's formal identification letters that are sent out, usually at the end of June. There's an appeals process if you have a student who isn't identified or isn't identified for the level or subject that you think they should be. You have 10 business days to appeal. And I'm gonna show you the what here is like how those decisions are made, and there's a chart. This. Identifications are made for math and English language arts. You can be identified for either or both. And this chart goes through the criteria that were used. So some of them are abilities tests like the Naglieri that they take as 1st graders, the COGAT that they take as 2nd graders, and then STAR Math, the math benchmark. For 3rd grade and above, we've got the Math SOL. And then this shaded over here is the math characteristic rating scales, what the teachers fill out about the students. For ESOL students, we've got WIDA access for ELLs, and then there's the portfolio, teacher observation, my observation based on what I've seen in enrichment. And this is labeled as level 2. Level 2 and level 3. So level 2 here, I don't want to go in too specifically about what this looks in terms of services, because it's not always the same, and there is a link at the end to the YouTube presentation that they gave at Oak Street. This is usually level 2 differentiation in the classroom, but it can be pushed in by an advanced academic specialist in conjunction with the classroom teacher, and it can be pull out in a small group. This level 3 is almost always pull out in a small group. Although with advanced math, it's sometimes that the kids are separated into a whole another grade level of math once they get into higher elementary school. And then once you get to middle school and high school, it's a whole, You don't have to be identified as anything to take advanced classes in middle school or high school. So this is the English chart, same stuff. If you want to contact me, the easiest way to get a hold of me is with email, and my email address follows the same format as everybody's, greenb@fccps.org. Morgan Acuzzo runs the advanced academic programs, and she's a great person to talk to too. I have a website. It's pretty general, but it does have this information on it and some examples like the ones that I showed today. FCCPS has done a lot of work on our global website, and the advanced academic page is a wealth of information. It's got all the forms you need, stuff about if you're referring your child, which would be when they're older than second grade. And so that's a great place for information. There's an FAQ page. And then this is the link to the parent coffee that Lisa Muller and Lauren Lauer did about advanced academics at Oak Street. And that's my little spiel.